This is Aaron Shedlock. You're listening to the audio flow.
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 You're listening to the audio flow with Jacques. Listening to audiobooks never sounded so good.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Audio Flow. And I'm so excited to be here with you guys today because I've decided to do something a little bit different. As you know, I am a big fan of romance and paranormal books, but today I wanted to kind of talk about something that is a little outside of my normal listening genre. And I put out a call a couple weeks ago through to a couple of my favorite audiobook groups and was seeking someone who had possibly produced and performed either a mystery or a thriller or something similar to that. And I ran into this guy. I didn't run into him physically, but he answered the call and shared with me his latest production title that is going to be something I think you all will enjoy and get a good laugh out of like I did. But it is a book called Money Talks, and it is written by Laurence Shames, and it is produced and performed by Jem Matzan. And let me just tell you, when you see the audiobook cover, you'll understand why this was such an interesting listen and such an interesting read. And we're going to get the inside scoop from Jem today. So Jem, hi, welcome to the Audio Flow. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. Thanks for having me on your show.
You're so welcome. So we had a chance to sort of chat because I put out a call looking for someone who had performed in a book that was a little bit different than most of the genres that I listen to. And I'm so happy that you answered and shared with me Money Talks, which is written by Laurence Shames. And so I want to kind of get into a little bit of information about how you got, how you actually found out about this particular project and kind of what motivated you or what grasped your attention to want to produce it.
Well, I'd worked with Laurence Shames on several other projects in the past, mostly the Key West series. So he's got 12 books in that series that started, I think, in the early 90s. And then he still writes them today. He writes about one a year now. And I've narrated about half of them, I think. And some of them actually were previous audiobooks, and he got the rights back from the publisher and then decided to self-publish them. And he cast me in the first one and was very happy with my work. So from then on, I've done all the other Key West books. And as I was nearing the end of his back catalog in Key West, he said, well, for our next project, because it's like once you have this really good working relationship and you're having a lot of fun with somebody and I'm making money doing it too, then you just want to keep it going. So you find excuses. He said, well, I've got, if you want, I've got these other two projects that, they never really did well. And I kind of know why. But so one of them is Virgin Heat, which was a Key West book, but it was kind of a weird one because it didn't have the main character in it, Bert the Shirt, and there was a reason for that. It was originally a screenplay, and it was like the amount of professional misfortune that poor Larry. So it was a screenplay. It was I think that was the one. It was like Tom Selleck and Drew Barrymore were cast in it or something. It was like all set to go. He wrote the screenplay. He was paid for the screenplay, and then I think it was something weird. Like I don't quote me on this exactly, but I think it was Tom Selleck's manager found out that it was filming in Canada, and so it was like a lower rate than he would get. And it's like, no, you're not doing that for that amount of money. Yeah. The whole thing fell apart. The title was nice though,
Virgin Heat.
Yeah, well, it's the name of a drink. It's a name of a drink, but a friend of mine, when I sent it to him, he goes, the only thing I can think of is an unstruck match.
That was put so nicely. That's the PG-13 version. Yeah.
Well, on the cover is a cat jumping through a flaming hoop. So how's that for Freudian?
Oh yeah.
So Virgin Heat didn't really sell all that well. It was never an audiobook either. So I said, yeah, I'll do Virgin Heat because I just want to do the rest of the series. He said the other one is called Money Talks. The whole premise of it was, it was good, but I don't know why people didn't buy it. And then he said, well, since Trump's running for president now, he's in the media a lot, so maybe it's got some appeal now. And then so we were talking about that like in February, but since it was a low priority project that had some questionable worth or return on it, even though it'd be fun to do, I got sidelined by a couple of other things, including his latest Key West release, which was a much bigger seller. So I started Money Talks, and I did, like 3 or 4 chapters of it, and then I had to stop and do One Strange Date, that's the most recent book in the series. And then he said, hey, if you have other stuff that you need to do, then don't worry about it. And I actually had a couple of other projects come up that were immediately paying. So I worked on Money Talks part-time, and then I started working on it full-time again and finally finished it. So we started talking about this like a year ago, and I picked it up like last February. So it's finally done. It's finally out.
It's finally done. And let's give our listeners a little bit of a background about Money Talks. And I mentioned earlier that if anybody looks at the audiobook cover, then they will get some type of idea instantly about this book, even though it's not a biography or anything like that. But the similarities, of course, in Robert Max and our now current president Donald Trump is pretty much probably 99% of what we think. What we think goes on behind the scenes, but again, of course, it's fiction. So why don't you give the listeners a little bit of information about the story?
Sure. So Laurence Shames, the author of this book, is also a lot of his work has been in ghostwriting, and his agent got a call in, I think, 2006 from Donald Trump's one of the many stormtroopers that works for Donald Trump, and said, hey, Trump may be interested in you ghostwriting a series. There's like a series of mystery novels or something. And Larry had met Donald Trump at like some cocktail party, and he talked to a couple of other writers who'd worked for Trump in that capacity, and nobody had anything good to say. It's kind of a history of screwing over writers, I guess. And he didn't really like Trump when he met him. He's like, I don't know if I want to do this. And then he started thinking about it, and then he started saying, hey, you know what? I could make this work. And he started getting excited about like, yeah, now I'm going to do it. And so he had his agent call back Trump's people, and he said, all right, are you sure that Donald Trump really wants to do this? Because, let's make sure that this is going forward. So the people talked to Trump, and he said, no, I don't want to do it. So the whole thing fell flat. Mm-hmm. But Larry had already gotten pretty excited about the story, so he wrote the book anyway, sort of. Mm-hmm. And the book is about a ghostwriter named David Collins, mm-hmm. who is given that same offer to write a book, not just for a Trump-like character, which is Robert Max, but also about him. So it's sort of a biography. Mm-hmm. Or it would really be an autobiography because it's going to be under Robert Max's name.
Right.
And the point of the story is to show what a business genius he is. And the trouble throughout the book is that he's not. He's really and it gets made worse because as he becomes more desperate, not just to save his financial empire, which really is not much of an empire, he's broke. And he's got debts that have to be paid or else he defaults on everything and loses everything. And so he's desperate to get a deal done that's going to bring in new money to service old debt. And there's like this whole business discussion about how this whole business that he's running is a house of cards, mm-hmm. which and I think it was Jenna in the story said, well, that's what you call it when it falls.
Yeah.
Before that, you call it an empire.
An empire.
But so Larry continued to write the story from that perspective, except it says like in the second sentence of the prologue that Robert Max is murdered. So it's it's a very interesting and unique and brilliant way of telling a story, because so a mystery story really is when you tell it's not really a genre, it's a method of telling a story. Any story can be a mystery if you start with the effect and then you go back, you lead into the cause over the course of the story. Mm-hmm. So Edgar Allan Poe was the first person to really do this with fiction. And so we think of that like Sherlock Holmes, right? So it always starts with the crime and then the clues, and then you follow that to the motives and everything. So this is interesting because it doesn't start with a dead body. It doesn't start with a crime. It starts with the knowledge that there will be a dead body later. Mm-hmm. And then, so the mystery for you as the reader or listener is to figure out which one of the many people who have been screwed over. Yeah. Because there are just about every character in the book, most of the characters in the book, by the end of it, have a pretty good motive to murder Robert Max. Yeah. So it's sort of a mystery, and it's sort of in the suspense genre. So there's a mismatch between what the listener or reader knows and what the main character as the narrator knows. And I think it's a really brilliant story. I would have done it anyway, I think, regardless of working history with Larry, because it's, when you produce audiobooks like this, I wouldn't take anything that I thought was bad, but I certainly take some things that I would not have ordinarily read, which doesn't mean that I didn't end up liking them by the end of it. Mm-hmm. But this is one that I probably would have read had I been aware of it.
Well, I'm glad that you shared it with me, because I don't think I would have found the book, and it's just kind of one of those things where you're kind of happy that you found it, because it's so different. Like I said, it's really different from what I normally listen to, and I kind of pride myself on saying that I'm pretty well-rounded, but I'm really not. It's more an oval. It's not technically round, so it's misshapen. But there's a lot of interesting aspects in this story, because there's some dry humor. There's some things that David is dealing with on his own personal level, and then it's him kind of being brought into Robert's world, per se, and this kind of odd relationship that they have with each other, and so I got a chance to finish the story, so I can't tell everybody what happens with it, but I want to know, what was kind of your research going in to be able to portray this particular character, Robert Max, of course, and David, because David is doing the narration. It's first person for him, and then but both. What was your research like?
Well, I got a synopsis from Larry on it, and then a description of the main characters, and he'll say, like, this guy lives in New York, but don't give him a New York accent. That that just wouldn't work. So for David Collins, when I started reading Money Talks, it occurred to me that this is sort of like a demented version of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, mm-hmm. and it's also sort of like a demented version of The Great Gatsby. It's almost a backwards version of The Great Gatsby, whereas, Nick Carraway starts the story by saying Gatsby was the greatest man I've ever met, where David starts the story, Robert Max is the most despicable person I've ever met. So it's sort of like the inverted Great Gatsby. And so I started Donald Trump's voice is one of those ones that you think you can get, and then you try it and you're like, ooh. Maybe I don't have any actual ability here. So it's such a hard voice to get, first of all, because I don't think I had really very much respect for the man. So I didn't really take it very seriously. But mm-hmm. I remembered back. So there was an Oliver Stone movie named W. It was like a W with a period, and it was with Josh Brolin, who played George mm-hmm. W. Bush. Yeah. And I remember seeing or hearing an interview with him where he said, I really didn't want this because I absolutely abhor the man's politics. I thought he was a moron. And he said, but as I started to read more about him and understand more about him, I developed a lot of respect for him. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to like the politics. You don't have to like the guy. But respect in this context means that you recognize not just their power, but also their humanity. where it's really easy to sit back and call George W. Bush an idiot. I mean, the guy's got an MBA from an Ivy League college. He can fly planes. He can fly military planes. They don't let morons do those things. But
Right.
and that gets into like a larger philosophical discussion of there really are no morons. There really are no stupid people. There are no smart people. It's just a matter of what you see and what you are willing to respect. So I had to develop some respect for Donald Trump, which actually, and in doing that, I understood why he's so dysfunctional in the media and political world, because everybody keeps trying to shame him or embarrass him, and he can't be. There's a phrase in Money Talks where Jenna is talking to David, and he goes, "Well, I don't understand. He's supposed to be obsessed with winning. He just seems to get shot down." And Jenna says, "Well, that's his gift. That's what he does. He doesn't know when he should feel humiliated. He's incapable of embarrassment." And that sums it right up right there.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know.
Well, it depends. I mean, it means that he has really no empathy, but so it's hard to see somebody as a human being when they're not really human in terms of their emotional capacity.
Right.
But so it's like, in that movie in W, there's one line near the beginning of the film where George W. Bush loses a local election or something, or a state election, and he says to Karl Rove, "I will never be out Texan or out Christian ever again." And that, bam, that's George W. Bush in one sentence. That explains everything about George W. Bush. So it was like that with Donald Trump and Robert Max of he's incapable of embarrassment. He doesn't know when he should be humiliated. So I started looking at the many Donald Trump YouTube clips. I probably watched about an hour of like 5 to 10 minute interviews and other things. And I noticed something that was rather, I don't know. I could see the progression in him, and it wasn't immediately clear to me what exactly the motivations were. If you go back to like the earliest clips that you can find that are substantial, like the early 80s, Donald Trump is very well put together. He doesn't shout anybody down. He doesn't shout at all. He's a very high-pitched, airy voice. He speaks with a cadence and tone that just suggests that it's not even possible to interrupt him. He doesn't try to talk fast. He's slow and deliberate. He talks as though he's thinking while he's speaking. I don't know if he is or not. He doesn't fidget. He sits up straight. His posture is fantastic. He always looks good on camera. His tie, his suit, everything is all, you never see him in an uncalculated moment. And he was really very thoughtful and, in what he was saying. And I don't think he was ever really a good businessman, but I think he started out doing a lot of honest deals. And then as time went on, just like Robert Max, he was starting to look for screw jobs because, can I get money from these people and what can they do as a result? Much, much later, 20 years later. I thought, man, in 1982, if you'd said that Donald Trump was going to be president, nobody would have laughed at you because he was really composed. There was the one clip that comes to mind was he was being interviewed by Peter Jennings, the late Peter Jennings. And Jennings is like, he's using all the tricks. So journalists, especially on TV or on radio, they'll ask a question that they know is going to have a sensitive answer. And so if you're asking a celebrity about, that affair or that bar fight or something, they're going to say, oh, well, they're going to give you their political answer or whatever. And if you don't say anything, oftentimes they'll just keep talking until they feel like they've filled the space. Right. It's I knew it as the Mike Wallace pause because Mike Wallace was the television journalist who I don't know if he invented it or popularized it, but that's how I always thought of it. So there's Peter Jennings fidgeting, and he's clearly nervous and uncomfortable. And Trump is just sitting there, the 1982 Trump or 84 Trump. He's just sitting there. His posture is good. He says what he's going to say. There's the pause. And Jennings is like he's in over his head. Here's a veteran TV journalist who comes from, other TV journalists. And man, that, like, if you don't have any respect for Donald Trump, now that again, that doesn't mean you like him. That doesn't mean you agree with him. Like, you go back and watch some of those things. It's holy cow. The other thing is that his voice, his diction is perfect. It's like he went to finishing school. He does not slur his words. He does not use too much breath. He does not over enunciate either. And he's lost that. So all this stuff that I just described was early 80s Donald Trump. And that is not Robert Max, because Robert Max is like late 90s, early 2000s Donald Trump. By that time, Trump was no longer interested in making people think that he was a successful, smart businessman. He started to – you could see some cracks in the facade. And that's when he started getting into TV with The Apprentice. And he started making more money off of books. He was making a ton of money off of books. In fact, while I was doing this, I saw something fly by in news, I don't know, like 6-8 months ago about Donald Trump's income statement. And the two main sources of income were the Apprentice, the TV show, and licensing rights, and his books, which he didn't write. So it's not even real estate. So he started getting more interested in in the reality show personality. But he was also in a culture at that time which started to get more outlandish. You couldn't just go on TV and be the smart businessman. That's not exciting enough. You have to have an edge. So you have to be somebody worth reporting on all the time, which is reality TV. It's staying in the news. Your job in reality TV is to stay in the news. Mm-hmm. And so he started doing that. And the Trump we have now is just totally fallen apart. I mean, his diction has gone straight to hell. He's constantly finger wagging and trying to talk over people and shout people down and insulting. He never did that before. And I don't know, some people say maybe he has dementia or something. And maybe he does. But, maybe that was also just his natural progression into a point where he no longer cared what people thought. Or he hasn't transitioned out of reality TV or something. But it was that transitional period between the quiet, reserved, I want you to think I'm a brilliant businessman guy, and the reality show star shouting people down and firing them. That transition period is Robert Max. So I had to find some video clips of that era and tried to get down his changing cadence. Yeah. Sometimes he's really slow, and then sometimes he talks really fast. It just I tried to figure out exactly when that was, and it didn't. I couldn't get enough clips, so I read it like it seemed it needed to be.
Well, I from listening to the book, I think that you put those the pacing and the correct tones where they should be. And what I find really interesting about the story, again, is that it's technically fiction, but it really, like you said, it really makes you think about the inner workings, because again, since the whole idea about ghostwriting this story for Donald Trump was scrapped, but then it was still published, but not technically about him or for him, and that the likeness is pretty uncanny. So anybody who kind of listens to this book or reads this book will see those similarities. And I wonder, just out of your opinion, after completing this particular audiobook, what do you think who do you think would be the people that would gravitate more toward being able to accept this as just kind of, it's fiction? Or do you think that people will take that and believe that this was made as a mockery? Or what are your thoughts about that? Because again, you see the picture on the front, that's his hair. It looks just like it.
It's unmistakable.
Yeah, I mean, it's the comb over. And then you have Robert Max. You sound just like Donald Trump. Well,
thanks.
As close to Donald Trump as can be, almost
as we
Saturday
care to go.
Night Live version. And so just what do you think some of those people would think about this story?
It was written in 2007, so it's before Donald Trump was in politics, and that's in the foreword that Larry put into the audiobook. He said, "This is not prophetic. It may be timely, but it had nothing to do with that." So I think I think people who admire Trump would probably find some entertainment value in it, if there are any of those people left. People who really can't stand him and want to see him fall and want to see the behind-the-scenes flaws that very likely exist. I mean, Larry really, really did a fantastic character study of Donald Trump and all the things that work and don't and why, and the kinds of people that are attracted to somebody like that. So you have somebody who's of a bullying nature, kind of like that, a sociopath, really, and it's kind of like a mafia story. Mafia stories are all about loyalty and backstabbing and betrayal.
Right.
So you're expected to be really, really loyal to somebody who may decide to kill you, or you're expected to be loyal even though you're going to go to prison unless you talk.
Right.
So most mafia stories have to deal with that at their core. But that sort of person who demands loyalty above all else attracts a certain kind of other person, several kinds. So it attracts like junior sociopaths who see him as an accomplice now, but will be a victim later. Mm-hmm. And it attracts people who are eager to please because it is so easy for them to do. And in the book, that's Carlton Phelps, mm-hmm. the CFO. He's a brilliant accountant, and it's like he takes the loyalty thing seriously, even though his ethical sense is being violated. It's a very good pairing: somebody who wants to please and somebody who demands to be pleased. And the other kind of person, and this really is the most insidious one, is the person who is just doing their job. Yeah. And I think Jenna is a great character in this story, and I think Jenna is Robert Max's one of his assistants, mm-hmm. and she's honest. She doesn't reveal things that she knows that she shouldn't. So she is loyal, but she also is not. She's not loyal in a way that sacrifices anything about her integrity. Mm-hmm. So she won't lie. She will not take a fall for Robert Max, but she is contributing to a lot of the bad stuff that he does by just doing her job. It occurred to me that, man, I think it was Martin Luther King that said the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Well, I think the definition of evil is people just doing their job. And as I go through more things where, you got to call because your bank screwed up or something like that, like every time you hit something that really shows that you don't matter as a person, as a consumer, whatever, it's like that kind of comes to mind. It's like this person is just doing their job. They could do the right thing, but they're not going to do the right thing because there is no benefit for them. Right. So those are the kinds of people that are attracted by a Trump or a Max type character, and I think Larry really nailed it. It's truly a great character study in that kind of a story. But he has a lot of experience with that. He wrote a best-selling book on the mafia. He ghost wrote it, and that was Boss of Bosses. And then the Key West Capers series has got some to do with organized crime. Mm-hmm. So it occurred to me that a lot of the same themes from mafia stories are in this, and it seems very similar.
Yeah, so two things that you said there. So. Hopefully when everybody else listens to the story, they'll pay attention to Jenna too, because I think she was kind of one of the persons that worked with him that really didn't stand for some of his antics, and I just think that and there was this scene. I just heard it probably a couple of hours ago when Robert's like, "Oh, great, an office romance," and she's basically like, "Yeah, stay in your place."
She took no crap from him.
None.
But she was loyal to him, but honest about the situation, and her integrity is amazing, right? Because nobody gets her to do something she doesn't want to do,
right?
And she speaks up in the right way at the right time. Mm-hmm. She doesn't let anybody steamroll her. She's a wonderful character.
Yeah, I think she was probably my favorite character in the book. I don't know.
Yeah, everybody the glue of the story.
Yeah, everybody has a favorite secondary, and so she would be my second. But I would like to talk a little bit about David's character. Sure. And your portrayal of David. One, because you work so close with, you call Laurence Larry, so I'm sorry, Laurence. I'm going to call you
Easier to
Larry
say.
because Jim did it. But you work so closely with him, and this being part of his profession as being a ghostwriter, was he someone that you kind of got some notes from about how to portray this character, or did you just kind of figure it out yourself to give David this voice?
Since we have a history of other books that we've done together, we've developed a pretty decent creative process where he understands this is his story, but it's my performance, not in that I own it, but I'm bringing something to it. And if it doesn't match exactly what's in his head, he thinks about it, and then he says, no, that's not exactly right. Let's try it more like this or less of that. And if it doesn't match what's in his head, he thinks, yeah, but that still works. Then he'll say, okay, go with it. So for David, I asked him, do you want him to have a New York accent? What do you want him to sound like? He didn't really have too much of an opinion. He didn't want him to have too much of an accent. I think accents, especially in audiobooks, when you have so little to work with in terms of how you communicate, it really communicates a lot. Mm-hmm. I think people have a lot of preconceived notions about what a New York accent really means, and it didn't seem to fit David's character very well. But David's also very educated. I mean, he went to college and got a degree in English something or other, right? And he's an author. So
right.
The general rule I find, I don't know if there's any research on this, the more educated somebody is, the less of an accent they typically have in their public personality. But when they go back home, they still talk like they grew up.
Yes, but I've heard this on many occasions from authors to narrators, and they say, I try to keep it. They call it general American, and then when they're riled up or they're around people they grew up with or back home, then you hear all the accent, I guess, kind of come in, and that's the same for me. Like I grew up in Indiana, but I also lived in North Carolina and Arizona and Florida. So I just have the kitchen sink accent that normally when I'm on the show, I try to keep it pretty mainstream. So I think you did really well with David's character and keeping it with that general American, him and Aaron's backstory. I really liked. I liked that Larry put that part of David's story in there, so it wasn't just about him ghostwriting and following Robert around, but really about some things about David. And I don't want to give it away, so you guys are gonna have to go listen. But before you say something, Jim, we're gonna listen to a sample that you gave us, so we can talk a little bit about that. How's that?
That's excellent. Let's do that.
Okay, so everybody, we're gonna listen to an excerpt. And this is, according to Jim, it's when Max meets with the Godfather. And let's take a listen.
The engines were cut. My ears still rang. Max said, "Remember, you're not a writer. You're an associate of mine. That's all we need to say. Don't speak unless you're spoken to. Have coffee if it's offered. Got it?" A man appeared at the helicopter door. He was a large fellow, and he wore a quilted nylon vest. It did not occur to me till later that the vest was bulletproof. He led us from the pad to a gravel walkway that wound through trees and brittle grass and eventually brought us to the house. We were on the south side of the building. There was a solarium made of curving panels of greenish glass. Entering, we felt a sort of Floridian humidity, and saw an older man, whose back was to us, carefully spraying orchids with an atomizer bottle. In no great hurry, he turned to face us, then he slipped his gardener's apron over his mane of silver hair and put it aside on a bench.
"Hello, Robert," he said. "Good to see you again."
"Hello, Victor," Max said. "You're looking well."
"Bullshit. I'm looking old and fat, and my liver's acting up. Who's your friend?"
"Dave Cullen, a trusted assistant."
The man with the spray bottle welcomed me and offered us coffee. Max said he'd love some. I just nodded. I was having a tough time getting my voice to work. I was also having a tough time getting my feet to move and keeping my bowels from rumbling or melting. This was because I recognized the man with the orchids,
though the newspaper pictures I'd occasionally seen of him were always of a younger, harder, meaner man. They didn't show the age spots on his hands or the slightly jaundiced cast of his skin. His name was Victor Magnola, and he was, by most accounts, the godfather of the New York Mafia.
Yes, and that's a perfect teaser because it's okay, everybody. The book is it's long, okay? It doesn't end at 40 chapters. This was chapter 38, so you have probably 22 to 25 more chapters to go. But I like this kind of introduction because you see, darn, I can't tell you how they even get to this point where they're going to have this meeting.
Robert's trying to borrow money to buy Rockefeller Center.
Okay,
so he's trying to get somebody else to finance the deal so that he can manage the property, which Trump worked like that too. Where it's like, hey, why don't you buy this building and pay me to manage it, and then I'll get like 20% of everything. So basically somebody else carries all the risk.
Yeah, see, I didn't want to tell everybody that part. So you just told everybody the part that I was trying not to tell them. But...
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that comes out early in the book. I mean, that's the whole book is a series of vignettes like this where, he's meeting with these investors and this hedge fund guy, and then the mafia guy is one of the last few.
Yeah, right before the downfall, before the cards fall, or whatever we want to call it. But but it's so funny that I love, like, David has these kind of little inside moments where he's thinking, and it's so dry when you are doing, or when you're speaking for David, but I laugh anyway because it's like I mentioned to you the other day when he's like, when he first meets Robert Max, and he's like, his face is perfectly pink, like he hired somebody to smack his cheeks or something.
I wonder if he hired somebody to slap his cheeks.
Yes.
Like it's hilarious, but like, in David's mind, it's like he's really wondering this.
Yeah, and I would be too.
I had John Cusack in mind, although John Cusack has a Chicago accent that he couldn't lose. Wild horses couldn't drag it out of him. So especially, because I thought of it kind of like Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. So I kind of had, because he's a ghostwriter in that too. So I kind of had like his image in my mind when I was reading that. It was very difficult with the narration because the narrator is always a character, to me anyway. I mean, to me, it's not a story unless you do the voices. But the narrator is more of a character in this because because it's first person.
Right.
And so he's telling you what happened and what he was doing at the time. So it's a little bit more than just a character. It's like it is a full character, but it's slightly different. When David's narrating, when he's telling you what happened, it's kind of like you're in his head while he's writing it. Right. Whereas his dialogue is realistic for the context in which it's delivered. Right. So there's a difference between his speaking voice and his narration voice.
Yeah, I totally get that. And so basically David's two people.
Yeah. You're dealing kind of like with present David, who's narrating it, telling you what happened, and then you're dealing with past David, who, in the context of the novel, it's all present tense for him. So it's one person looking back on their situation. Yeah,
I also liked the way that you portrayed the Godfather's character. I mean, and so did you kind of weigh in on the movie The Godfather or some other type of mafia dramas, or did you just say, okay, this is how I think he sounds? Because actually, when I think about, if I close my eyes and listen to you in that character, I do think of a big guy who's got like a scruffy beard that's kind of graying and with like a button down shirt and suspenders. I don't know, and maybe a cigar. That's how he looks in my head.
Yeah, it's Larry's very good at describing characters with really good succinct. Like he can sum somebody up in a few sentences. He doesn't need a whole paragraph or a page or anything. So I've done a lot of different mafia boss type characters, and they all, usually if I can't think of somebody I know, like I haven't really met very many mafia bosses as far as I know.
Are you sure?
No, I'm not sure.
You would tell us though, right?
I know. Well, I worked on an Italian construction crew when I was a teenager, and you never really know.
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to pour the concrete. No. So if you don't know any real characters, you think of like, like I was thinking John Cusack in my head. And it's not a John Cusack impression. It's just like I need to have somebody's face and mannerisms in my head, and in order to do that. And so for this, it's kind of like Lawrence Tierney, who he was in a lot of old movies. He was in the Dillinger movie, but I know him from Reservoir Dogs. He was the old hard-nosed boss. It's like, you're Mr. Black. Like what was it?
When that kind of job, everyone wants to choose their own name. You got a bunch of guys who all want to be Mr. Black. Shut up, you're Mr. Pink.
That's not even good. But like Victor
Magnola. To me.
Victor Magnola's voice was very hard to do. I probably said all of his lines about 20 times before I got it. Robert Max, geez, the Trump voice was. I probably spent days of time just trying to get that right, trying to see it in my head the right way. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that I was going to go back and record some of the early Robert Max dialogue because it's you can tell it's him, it's okay, but you can hear that it evolves. And I thought, well, this is really good actually, because David says to Robert Max at their first meeting, well, I need to get a sense for your voice, like who you are. And so that's perfect. It fits right there because we're getting a sense for who his voice is too as listeners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I'm going to recommend this book because it's different. There's mystery. There's some dry humor. There's
romance.
I was going to say there's a little bit of romance in there. And it's just very different. And when you look at it, you'll be like me. And, all I can picture is Donald Trump. And even at Mac, when they said we're going to Max Towers, and I was like, oh, it's Trump Tower. No, but I'm recommending this story because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the production, and Jem, you did a fantastic job. Larry's writing, I hope that you're listening to this episode. Very good writing. I was not bored at any point. I didn't fall asleep while listening to it, so that's a big thumbs up and for both of you guys, because some audiobooks can be hit or miss sometimes, and so this one was a hit. But on as we leave this episode, Jim, I like to have a little fun, and I think that you listened to my episode with Exie Sands, and we did a little game there, and so I would not leave this episode without us playing my favorite game, which is Heads Up from Ellen's app. And so since this story is based out of New York, I'm going to give you the New York deck. Okay, are you familiar with this game at all?
You're going to have to explain it.
Okay, so Heads Up, basically, I have a word that I have to get you to say, but I have to, you can't see me, so I'm going to give you clues so that you can guess the words. All of them will have to do with New York. So it can be, it can be a place, it can be a person, it can be a thing. And I will tell you, I've only been in New York once, so I might suck at this, but hopefully I won't suck too bad. Now I have to find it. There's also a category called politically correct. So we can go with that one, and we can go with New York if they still have that one up here, which they might not. So if they don't have that category, since let's try with politically correct, or we can go with France, because France is in New York too. So you get to pick which category you want.
Well, there's only two kinds of people in this world. There are Seinfeld people and there are Friends people. I'm firmly in the Seinfeld category. I really couldn't stand Friends. I was not a Friends person. It's like I'm watching this going, if there was no laugh track, this would be creepy.
Oh, wait. I found New York City. I found New York City. So you can do politically correct or New York City.
Let's do New York City.
Okay, all right. And by the way, I'm a total Seinfeld person too. I love Larry David. I'm so glad that Curb Your Enthusiasm came back on TV. That was like the highlight of my month.
Next week, I think it's on HBO.
No, it started.
Did it?
Last weekend. You're behind.
Oh, I thought it was October 1st. See, I don't know what I'm doing.
It was on it's on. Go watch it.
Man, I can't call myself a Larry David fan now.
All right, here we go. So you have, I think, 30 seconds. There's usually 7 clues, and hopefully I know New York enough to get you to answer them.
Okay.
By the way, are you in New York?
No, I'm in Florida. I'm actually from upstate New York,
Okay.
Rochester, Fairport, actually. That's about 350 miles away from New York City. I've been to New York City like 3 times in my life.
Okay, so we're kind of on the same page then. So
Yeah.
we'll get through this together. All right. So it says Ellen loves New York. That's why she's shooting 2 of her premieres that week at Rockefeller. Get that Rockefeller Center. And so this is perfect. All right, here we go. Hit the play button. Place this on my forehead. Gotta turn up the music. All right. Oh, she plays the piano. She is biracial. Her last name talks about the black and white keys on the piano. What are they called?
Oh, black and white keys on the piano?
Oh,
Jeez.
did I say? I didn't say. What did you just say? What was? Oh,
Me?
you use this to open the door.
Open the door? I don't know, a knob?
To unlock a door.
Key? Oh, Alicia Keys?
Yes. Okay, so I sucked at that clue. Sorry.
I'm not too familiar with modern music.
Yeah,
I'm
me
kind of
either.
old school.
Okay. So this is somebody who likes to spread untruths or rumors. They it's usually women. They do this all the time. I heard
A porch
that such
sitter?
and such. Ooh. Oh my God, we suck. Ooh, this is a famous place in New York. It's not a circle, but
Times Square.
sucked. Yeah, Madison Square Gardens.
Oh, well, that's a square.
Okay, we have to try that again. That was just awful. We should edit that whole part out of this episode.
All right, I won't tell anyone.
No, we can't. It's gonna air and it's airing, so we can't edit. Sorry. Okay, let's try it again. So
Okay.
these might be kind of over my head because I
Me
didn't
too.
watch Gossip Girl or anything like that. But we'll try it
I don't-
again. Okay.
All right.
Next time we'll have to get you this app and you can give me clues.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Okay, here we go. Can you hear the music?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. A pecan. People sell these on the side, and they usually have like cinnamon and sugar on it. The little vendors sell them.
Cracker Jack?
No, it's something
No?
like that, but they put them over like fire, and they're kind of toasty.
Chestnuts?
Okay, keep that last word. It's something you do to them.
Roasted chestnuts? Roasted
Yes,
chestnuts?
roasted nuts. We'll go with that.
Okay.
This was a Broadway play, and it has to do with like paper boys.
Paper Boys. Oh, geez. I don't know.
This comes on every night to tell you what's going on in the world. It's like
Uh.
it comes on at 8:00, 9:00.
The news?
Okay, now it's a play. Now add that. What is the play called?
Oh, newspaper or like news radio? News? I don't know. God, I'm so bad at that.
No, Jim.
No, I don't know.
It was Newsies.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I would have got that.
Okay, yeah, that was awful.
That's too pop culture for me. If it was the producers, I could have got it.
Okay, so here's the thing. I need you to redeem yourself.
Uh-oh.
So we're gonna do a different subject.
Gonna
So
be here all day.
you can choose from let's see. I don't know. Okay, I don't know anything about baseball. There's
Me either.
oldies but goodies. There's it's like the 2000s. Bottoms up.
That sounds like alcohol. I'm kind of an expert. So let's do that.
Okay, bottoms up it is. Let's see what it says. Of course, it says purchase. That's fine. You're totally worth the 99
To buy.
cents. No, we're not purchasing real alcohol or anything, unfortunately. Okay, this deck is filled to the brim with your favorite mixed drinks, brands, slang, and all the things you love and hate about drinking. So let's see how much I know about drinking.
Oh, boy.
Wish me luck. And you.
Good luck to both of us.
All right. Oh, it's a beer. It's not a domestic. It's like a German beer.
Warsteiner?
Oh gosh, don't think that far. It's not. It's in a green bottle.
Heineken?
Yes. Is that German? I don't know. If something is not false, it is what?
True.
Okay, and you are this type of citizen.
Natural.
No, you live where? You're from the U.S. and what is the other part of that?
True USA. True
No, just give me the last word. What is the A?
America.
Mean? Okay.
True
no,
America.
You are a what?
True American.
Yes, that's the name of the drink. Whatever that.
I'm a true American.
Oh, this is something that the guys used to say. I'm totally blank when they're drunk.
Smashed. Crocked.
We ran out of time.
Oh.
That was wasted.
Oh.
That was awful.
How many euphemisms for wasted are there?
A lot. But they gave us the clean version.
Crocked, drunk, half shot, full shot.
Yeah, Yeah.
Tight. You go back to Hemingway, it's like, I'm feeling very tight. Like, what the hell? You look it up and it used to mean drunk.
Is that what they said? We should bring that back.
Yeah, I mean something different now, though.
Yeah, we're just going to go around and say, I'm feeling kind of tight right now.
Yeah.
People might think your pants too tight.
I may have a gender difference there, and it also might mean that you're closer to people like, yeah, we're tight. We're not really tight. We're just drinking together.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to an event this weekend, and I'm going to start saying it. I'm feeling kind of tight right now.
Tight in the Hemingway sense. You can sound.
Yeah. Do I have to say
it
that?
Can't get much more pretentious than that. What, you've never read Hemingway? Oh my God. Well, I'll tell you about it.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun. So, Jem, I would love to have you back on the show sometime when you have some other projects that are available. Anytime, you are so welcome. And I would love for you to tell people how they can get in touch with you, either on social media or on your website, and anything else you want to promote before we end today's episode.
No, just Larry's other books are the Key West series, and When He Talks is very much like his other books. It's got a little bit of romance, a little bit of action, a little bit of mystery, and really great characters. And then I've done a bunch of other romance titles too. So if you're into that sort of thing, I kind of span the genre from male romance stories to shapeshifter stuff. So. In terms of getting in touch with me, it's pretty much all Jem Matzan, JEMMATZAN. And that's for Twitter, at Jem Matzan. JemMatzan.com is my site. And then I think it's also, on Facebook, it's Facebook/Jem Audio or something. I think that's what it is. So, you can tweet me or whatever. if you so feel like it. Got hate mail or, fan mail or whatever.
I love when people are giving their Facebook information. They're always like, I think, because, Facebook is so difficult with the // and all of that. They can just type your name in too and find you, I'm pretty sure. You're the only Jem.
There's, Matzan is totally a made up name. It's an immigrant name. It's like my grandfather came here and they said, what's your name? What? Yeah, whatever, and it's wrote down Matzan. He was from the Ukraine. I think my father's family traced it back to see where it came from. But so I mean, like if you see a Matzan, it's almost certainly one of my relatives. So there aren't very many of us.
Well, I mean, my last name's Protho, so you aren't seeing non-relatives with that name either. So I totally understand you on that one. But like I said, thank you so much, Jem, for being here and sharing with us Money Talks. Everybody, Money Talks is available on Audible, so be sure that you go by, pick it up, leave a review, let Jem and Larry know what you thought about the story, and also go by and check out Jem's collection of other books and any of those other genres that you're interested in. And again, I really enjoyed this story. It was not what I expected. It was so much more than what I expected. And if you're looking for something that's a little different and outside of your normal listen, then definitely I recommend this book. Thanks everybody so much for listening to this episode of The Audio Flow. Be sure that you follow us on Facebook at The Audio Flow. Also on Twitter at _audio_flow. Also on Instagram at The Audio Flow. And just so you know, this show will air on iHeartRadio and TuneIn. It is also available for download on iTunes and Google Play. And if you like YouTube, you can find it also on Booking Around Town's channel. Until next time, everybody, have a great week. And remember, listening to books never sounded so good.